Everything is fine now. It should be fine. You should be seeing now the screen, and I'll be toggling back and forth between the camera and the screen. Let's hope that technology will help us and we wouldn't have a problem streaming. If there is a problem, feel free again to let me know and chat with me. Normally now the picture is back. Okay. Now, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to build the foundation theory of quality management that will help us in the context of this course, in the context of quality, help us with implementation. What we're actually trying to conclude actually at the end is that quality is in general a generic and particular definition that has actually different perspectives, and different philosophers use different definitions of quality. We'll try to agree on one of them here, or a couple of them. We'll try to agree as well that actually the most important thing for us as quality professionals is to build our own quality systems for our own company. Now, as we will see later, we will see as well that there are many approaches that are unfortunately conflicting, and they tend to actually push us to philosophies that are very different. We will start actually by having a look at the history, more or less, of quality that started in the beginning with inspection. In the 20th century up to the 60s, engineers used to rely heavily on inspection. Inspection, however, turned out to be extremely limited when it comes to application. In particular, inspection has the limitation that actually not always would we be able to outweigh the cost of inspection. Inspection sometimes is extremely costly and not worth it when the value is not as important as the effort that we put in, as the the cost that is associated to it. And therefore in the 60s we started seeing actually more and more the concept of quality control that assumes, as we discussed previously, that assumes actually process in general, should we be able to control it, will produce lower and lower defects and variability. However, you remember as well that when we discussed quality control, or when you saw it in TBS 951, you were told, and we agreed, that variation is part of life, and that processes, as much as we can control them, as much as we want to control them, are not controllable, because sources of variation are different. There are two sources that we can quote, common sources of variation that are natural to the process. This is, for example, the vibration, the normal vibration of the earth. This is potentially the micro outages that are natural to electricity. This is the normal evolution of temperature, etc., etc., etc. As opposed to what we call assignable causes or specific causes. Those are causes that we still cannot control. They are incidents that happen. They are not supposed to be repeatable, and they are incidents that we have to plan with and potentially try to work with actually as they happen. Again, quality control moved, showed its limitation, and at one point we thought that actually, should we be pursuing a larger scope of quality, let's develop a system, a quality management system, or let's develop a standard that we will try to stick to. And those standards are universal, and they allow us to benchmark our company against best practices. And should we be trying to pursue best practices, then we will have to comply with those standards. This is called quality assurance. Quality assurance by itself assumes that processes are replicable and that systems and philosophies or quality management systems are applicable to different companies. Well, this we know that it's limited. Now, the other thing with quality assurance, we know actually that those models, for those who have been involved into ISO implementation or AFQM implementation or any of the standards implementation, you know that we tend actually to can the company or force fit the model to the company. And sometimes as well, those standards, once achieved or once complied with, don't guarantee that the outcome is the right outcome, and don't guarantee especially long-term viability or durability of the implementation. Some of you are working now on projects, and those projects are about implementation of a quality management system, and one of the questions that you are supposed to be answering is, would this implementation be yielding sustainable results? Now, the next evolution for quality was total quality management, and this is a trend of the 80s and 90s, which in a nutshell, and again in this class I've insisted on purposely to always give you different definitions of total quality management, just to say that total quality management in a nutshell is the adoption of the right processes, the right activities at the right time to satisfy actually the stakeholders, all the stakeholders. Should you adopt this kind of philosophy, and should you be simultaneously satisfying the four stakeholders? If you remember, the four stakeholders being the customers, the employees, the partners, and the shareholders, then you'll be accounting in a balanced way, in a very balanced way, the interests of all those stakeholders, and ultimately those you will be actually pursuing and obtaining normally a better quality. Total quality management is doing properly all the things at the same time, and it's a way of thinking, and it's a philosophy of thinking. Again, I want to remind you again of some of the comments that we talked about quality or total quality management is a matter of culture, and it's not necessarily a matter of just a process or a group of processes or a system. It's a culture, it's a way of thinking. Now, the next evolution, which is the trend of the 2000, actually the current trend, or some of the trend that some of the authors have been pushing, is this concept of quantum quality, where organizations would make quantum or leapfrogs in terms of improving their processes and ensure that those processes are significantly improved. Of course, this you would assume as well that the company is ready for this kind of activity and this kind of process and this kind of activity change as well. Now let's go through each of those processes, and then see the underlying philosophy as well as the dimensions behind it. The quality control paradigm, and we're talking here of paradigms. The quality control paradigm ensures or assumes that quality is defined as the absence of variation in output. Now, of course, as we are seeing, some of you are now currently seeing the quality control course, TBS 951, and you know that again, variation is part of life, and it's not about the absence of variation in the output. However, we might, and rather than absence of variation, we'll say that we want the control of variation. We want at least to be comfortable that the variation is within acceptable ranges. If you remember the concept of capability, the concept of acceptable output. The dimensions of this paradigm are the fact that we are able to inspect and that we are able to measure results, and then out of those results we can build a view or perspective of how much are we in control of the process, how much are we able to predict the output of the process and predict the kind of variability that is associated with the process. Now the next question is this variability acceptable or not? This is where the capability comes in. Let's see the next paradigm, which is the paradigm of quality assurance. And quality assurance is about conformance with standards, and hopefully conformance with high standards. Now, again, the dimensions underlying this paradigm are statistical analysis, process improvement, and as well the idea that we are able to compare processes and adopt standards. Some companies are not able necessarily to comply with high standards. Now, this is why some of the companies will struggle in the implementation, and especially the continuation, the sustainability of such standards as well. Now let's move to total quality management paradigm and TQM paradigm. And in this context, quality is defined as successfully meeting the expectations of the internal as well as the external customers. And some of you will notice actually that I'm using here in this slide the word internal customer, despite the fact that I don't like that word actually. The point actually, I had a discussion last class about this idea of internal customer. The point is not to have actually internal customer as one component in our company. However, I want you to be very careful about not using this excuse of internal customer, of the word internal, to actually escape the responsibility of the ultimate delivery to the external customers. Now, in TQM, beyond the internal and external customers, we are in business to satisfy the four stakeholders simultaneously and in a balanced way. Therefore, if you are to satisfy the shareholder, you would satisfy them by providing them with you'd be satisfying the shareholder with meeting their financial expectations, their profitability expectations, while satisfying the customers by providing them the right products at the right price, and satisfying the partners, the supply chain partners or the business partners, by providing them with the right business, I would say, or the right partnership, or the right support, or the right relationship. We support the employees by providing them with the right environment, the right working environment, and again, the right career, the right development career, the right recruitment positions, etc., etc. As we will see later when we talk about Deming, he talks about pride of workmanship. So the pride of being at work and excelling at work. Now, this total quality paradigm assumes already focus on customers, but as well an awareness of suppliers and team accountability, employee empowerment, and the concept of agility, basically the company being able to adapt it to its environment. And this is the concept of speed of execution. However, agility in adopting to new environment being the business environment in general, or being the life cycle of our products, or life cycle of our customer, or the life cycle of our company actually, and the company adopting different strategies at different moments as well. And this is a concept that is extremely important, the concept of agility as well. Now let's see as well now the quantum quality paradigm. And here in quantum quality, quality is defined as the achievement of leaps in work processes, stakeholder benefits, and personal commitments based on value of caring, and integrity. Two concepts here. The idea of leaps, basically significant improvements in processes, in work processes. Second thing, the concept of stakeholders, and the idea of pursuing stakeholders' benefits using care and integrity. Now, think about it in a little bit. Should you be caring for the interests of the shareholder, you'll be ensuring that they are sustainably receiving profits. Should you be caring about your employees, you'll be able to create a working environment, a caring working environment. Should you be caring about the customers, then you'll be looking at the value, at creating value to your customer rather than selling them any product. Should you be caring about your partners, you'll be ensuring that you develop the right partners for the right value chain, supply chain. By the way, value chain or supply chain are two sides of the same thing. The value chain is driven by the value that you're creating to the customer, while the supply chain is actually the setup that you're putting in place to deliver value as well to the customer and products and services as well. Now, this quantum quality paradigm assumes some dimensions that are extremely important. The idea of learning organization and learning as a company and as components of company, employees, partners, stakeholders, learning about the environment of the company. The idea of value and the concept of value, defining what value means for all those stakeholders, and how can we be creative in developing this. Now, the concept as well of integrity. Should you be integer by protecting all the interests, then actually all the stakeholders will be comfortable providing you with the right support and providing you with the right feedback actually on your delivery as well. And this is an extremely important concept because it shifts a little bit the quality management practices. It ensures that the paradigm is pushing all the stakeholder benefits at the same time, the personal commitments together, and pushing as well all the interests together rather than complementing them or rather than being competing. And this is an extremely important concept that is integrative. However, I would say that this concept would require actually a level of readiness of a company. Now, let's move to the next thing, where we are talking actually of quality theory. Now, three components that we'll try to do. First of all, let's see actually quickly four contributors, at least four contributions to the quality theory, and we can actually develop more views. We can look at more of them, but four actually summarize actually the mainstreams of quality thinking and quality contributions. So this is the first thing. Then we'll see actually a theory that is interesting, that says actually that despite the fact that all those theories might appear conflicting, in a nutshell, all of them are complementing each other, and depending on the situation, depending on the contingency, the situation that we are working in, we might choose actually to pick the right component of the theory to be used actually in our company. And actually, this is the biggest message that I'll keep on repeating here. There is no canned, off-the-shelf quality management system that you can implement in your company. Rather, you should develop the proper quality management for your system. And you should develop it taking into account the context of the company, the environment of the company, the history of the company, and the state of the company. And this is extremely important. And as we will see in the second part, where we are looking at this idea of contingency perspective in terms of developing a quality theory, that actually those are the questions we'll be asking ourselves. How are we set up? What are our weaknesses? What are the problems that we need to solve? What are the issues that we need to palliate for? What are the challenges that our company is facing in general in its perspective? And then knowing this, how do we develop now the right perspective, the right view of the quality management system that is appropriate for us? Again, after looking at the contingency perspective, we'll start by that, and then after that we will come back actually by looking at all the authors more or less of quality, and then we'll come with what we call actually an integrative view of quality management. Let's look at actually what are all those authors, all those theoreticians, philosophers of quality, what is their thinking. And again, we'll avoid the word guru. As you know, I'm not a real fan of this word, but rather we'll call philosophies or philosophers or thinkers or authors of quality. Now, the most known theoretician of quality, first of all, let's look at the quality theory. Is there one theory of quality? And the answer is no. There is not one unified view of quality. There is no unified theory explaining quality management in the supply chain that is widely accepted in the quality community. The literature, if we were to look at it, is sometimes contradictory and somewhat confusing. The differing approaches to quality improvement represent in general competing philosophies that are seeking their place in the quality marketplace, and therefore it's sometimes extremely confusing it's extremely confusing to put actually a sense into it. The concept I will suggest is you must grow in your company your own quality system. And I hope that in your projects as well, when you are thinking of a quality management system, one of the conclusions that you'll be seeing in terms of the difficulty of implementing third-party or off-the-shelf or canned quality management system is that those systems don't adapt necessarily to the environment of the company, and that the company didn't take the time to make the effort that is required. The effort, by the way, is an effort that is necessary to implement, to do, whether we do it ahead of time or we take the pain of the implementation. Now, as we will see in a little bit, the contingency approach identified the relevant conditions in a situation to actually apply the right theory. And we should actually, in this class, and especially in the whole discussion that we've always had, I've always insisted that those philosophers, those thinking, those philosophies of quality are just a reference for us, and they are not necessarily something that we have to 100% bind to or bind with. We need to be picking the right components that are relevant to our company and develop our own firm view of quality. Now, one of the biggest authors of quality is Dr. Edward Deming. And Dr. Edward Deming has been widely accepted as, I would say, the world leading author in quality. Many theoreticians have agreed that actually his thinking, despite the fact that they were done in more or less the 80s and discovered in the United States in the 90s, are actually the basis of proper quality management. Dr. Deming also significantly influenced Japanese industry before the late 70s, when actually the Japanese products started surpassing US products. Now, we saw last week and the week before, I think, in the other class, we saw a video from Dr. Deming talking about the diseases, the deadly diseases of companies. And if you remember, some of the comments that we had were that those diseases are extremely relevant in our times, in our present times, at least in our region. Those diseases are what make companies fail into competing. Deming emphasized as well on the management of a system for improving quality, and he insisted on using the statistical tools as a tool for continual improvement. Deming insisted on the idea of continuous, never-ending improvement. Let me remind you first about those 5 deadly diseases, and actually out of those 5 deadly diseases, there are 2 other diseases that Dr. Deming has talked about as well later in his life, and those are actually extremely important, and they reflect actually some of the issues that we will see in our present companies. 5 deadly diseases, if you remember, the first one is the idea of lack of consistency of purpose. And again, I insist on this in this context, that constancy of purpose has 2 parts. The first part being the purpose itself, and the second part being the idea of constancy. The first part, which is the purpose, tells us what direction the company will be taking. Now, if you remember when we were talking about Siemens and the case of Siemens, we said that actually for employees to be engaged with the company, they needed to trust 3 or 4 things in the company. Some of them, and the most important, being the direction of the company. Well, should the company not have a direction, forget about the trust, right? Now, that's the first part. The constancy of purpose, the constancy part, is about having proper, continuous drive towards that purpose. Now, should you not have a purpose, then we shouldn't be talking about constancy, right? So, should we have a purpose, and it being clear and being well crafted, then most probably will avoid some of the actually other diseases that are coming after that. And the constancy of purpose is an extremely important one. The second one being the emphasis on short-term profit. You see, the easy way, in general, the easy way for somebody that doesn't have a long-term vision is to focus on short-term. That's the easy way. You see it in companies, you see it for executives that don't know where they are going, you see it for employees that don't know what tasks they would want to do, you see it actually with students that don't know actually how to start their career. They will be taking day-to-day decisions. Short-term decisions. The easy way will be taking when you actually have not taken the time to think about the long term. So instead of focusing on long-term objectives, companies tend actually to be looking most of the time at very short-term decisions. We see in companies CEOs actually firefighting day in, day out. We see executives taking care, for example, of tactical or operational issues, while executives are meant to be looking on the long range. We see companies actually deciding very short-sighted, making short-sighted decisions. We see companies actually not focusing on the long term and jeopardizing the long term on the expense of the short term. We see CEOs actually jumping hoops to follow actually instructions that are coming from higher authorities, because in general those CEOs or those executives don't have actually a long-term plan. And this is a big disease, one of those diseases actually that we still see in our companies. If you look at the time you're spending, some of you are executives in their companies, some of you are directors, managers, etc. If you look at the component of time and the proportion of time that you're spending focusing on firefighting or trying to solve urgent issues as opposed to looking at long-term and preparing reports for the long-term and preparing long-term vision and analyzing the market, analyzing the environment and trying to position yourself to be competing for the long-term in a sustainable way, you'll see that actually you're not spending enough time for that task, for that extremely important task, by the way. So that's important. Now, this disease, the second disease about the short-term focus, comes as well, especially is emphasized when companies are not able to focus, to have the right consistency of purpose. Well, if you don't have the right vision, you don't know where you're going, so you look at your feet. You watch where you put your feet. And this is why actually some of the companies will be focusing on this and not necessarily focusing on the long term. So short term, as I said, is an easy way out, is an easy solution for companies and for executives. However, it typically jeopardizes the future of the company, and it jeopardizes the long-term vision of the company. Third thing, this concept of evaluation of performance, merit rating, pay per merit, annual appraisal, annual review. Remember last week we had this discussion and I asked how many of you feel stressed about being appraised at the end of the year. How many of you feel uncomfortable having feedback that you judge or deem actually unfair? How many of you thinking at the end of every appraisal to change jobs? How many of you think that it's unfair? How many of you think that the objectives that are set are not meant to help you improve, but rather to judge your performance for the past and try to punish you should you not achieve them? And this is an extremely important thing. Now, remember the discussion we had, and let me re-emphasize again. I'm not making the point that we shouldn't have performance appraisal. I'm making the point that appraisal should be done for the right reason and should be pursued the right way. I'm making the point in particular that appraisal shouldn't be should it be not implemented properly, appraisal most probably will be counterproductive, and you will be actually not winning the competitive world, and you will be losing talent because of that. Appraisal is a way actually to trigger action. If it's not meant for action and it's just looking at the past and looking at the review at the past year, then most probably appraisal will be actually be done to judge how bad did you perform or how not good did you perform. And this is what Dr. Deming used to say, that this was called by some of his colleagues as management by fear. Now, management by objective should be done the proper way. Management by objective should be done for performance in general. Performance measurement should be done at the three levels. If you remember when we were talking about Siemens, when we were talking about the Siemens case, we said that for the Siemens case, we needed to have 3 layers of measurement. If you remember, 3 layers of measurement. The first layer would measure the direction of the company, and this is related to the consistency of purpose, if you remember. So basically, how the company is performing as it pertains to its path. This is the first path. The second one would be measuring the performance of the team, not necessarily for evaluating the performance of the team only, but rather for triggering the right behavior or the team behavior. Now, should the measurement be only punishing, then forget about triggering any sustainable behavior. The third measurement will be actually related to the third measurement would be related to individual and individual objective. And should you be developing your performance system the right way, then most probably you'll be improving on your performance in a sustainable way, in a long-term way, and you'll be contributing to the consistency of purpose. Again, it all comes to the same thing. Now, one big result or big drawback of management by objective and annual appraisal is your management leaving your company. And your management leaving your company, you have to replace them, and most of the time you'll be replacing them with other people. That's the fourth disease that Dr. Deming talked about. You cannot throw a superstar in a company and assume that the superstar will perform perfect. I took the example, if you remember, last week of I wanted to choose Messi and somebody chose Ronaldo. Ronaldo that you'll throw in a, let's say, I wouldn't say a mediocre team, I would say a normal team. Ronaldo thrown in a normal team wouldn't know how to pass the ball to, who to pass the ball to, who to take the ball from, and how to defend, and he wouldn't be able as well to do the goalkeeping as well. So ultimately he wouldn't be making your company more successful. On another hand, Ronaldo, rest assured, will hit in the walls of the company. Those who don't want the company to move forward, those who are not able to see how the company should move forward, those who actually might break his foot, if you remember the discussion that we said, and you would lose Ronaldo forever. People, superstars that you see coming into companies would tend actually to get burned out after that company. Not only would they fail in that company, but they will be failing in the future tasks that they will have and the future companies that they will have as well. Now, what's the solution? Give the time to the time. You bring somebody to a company and give them the time to get into their roles. And companies should be planning this. Companies should be bringing in the right people and giving them the time to take their roles properly. Companies should actually be able to be promoting people from the ranks and getting them to take the lead in the company. Now, sometimes it's not very possible. Understandable, but you should be trying at least to give the time to the new recruits to stay in the company long enough so that they are not making mistakes in their first weeks or their first months. I always take the example of the president-elect in the United States that takes office the 21st of January and that actually doesn't make any decision, any significant decision before more or less the 5th of May, where they actually have the address to the nation. And that address to the nation is to say that now I'm ready to rule, and now this is what I'll be doing. Now, a company wouldn't have a problem with anybody saying that I'm here first to learn, and then after that I'll start contributing to the company. Believe me, companies would appreciate that as a sign of maturity of the manager or the leader. Finally, companies tend to run on visible figures only. Now, this is in the time of Dr. Deming used to be called visible as opposed to invisible figures. We call them now tangible and intangible decisions. Tangible and intangible. Intangible meaning all the value that are created by customers, all the value that is created by this kind of charisma, or that leadership, or that kind of market, or this kind of patent that you have. All this should be always kept in sight. All this should be always looked at, not necessarily when you are in an accounting firm trying to find a solution, or trying to find the outcome, or trying to sell the company. Companies should keep the eyes on the real ball, and the real ball is the customer. And what's the value of a satisfied customer? What's the value of dissatisfied customer? It's big value. Now, nobody's able to quantify it, but it is important to work on. Now, those are the 5 diseases that we saw in the video, if you remember. There are 2 other diseases that Dr. Deming introduced later, which are the 6th and the 7th one. The 6th one is interesting because employees that are not satisfied would tend to be more sick. Employees that are not within the environment, the right environment, will be more stressed, will be less productive. And he's talked about the excessive disease, excessive medical costs for employees' healthcare. How do we measure it in our companies? Look at the number of days sick leave that employees are taking. Genuine and non-genuine sick leave. Now, unfortunately, this is an area that is considered as a benefit to employees, and benefits that are there to be used. So employees use excessive medical costs. So if you take off all the fake sick leave, you'll notice, and it was noticed at least in the United States where studies are done on these type of things, that the number of genuine sick leaves have increased. Sick leave days have increased actually over time because of the stress that is put on the employees for all kinds of reasons, for less resources that are required, for additional stress, for the focus on the short term, for the fact that the employees are always on call, always under stress, always being reprimanded, always being shouted at, always being solicited. You cannot have a healthy and working environment if the employee is always feeling guilty, stressed, and actually underperforming. You cannot be doing a performance appraisal, putting the employees under a very tight, high pressure, and then expect the employees to be healthy and not to be stressed. You cannot as well expect the employees that are changing. Again, we go back to the number 4, changing companies, put under new stress of learning the new company, knowing the culture, fitting in the culture, and opposing some of the culture. You cannot expect that, and then after that, expect the employee to be healthy. So all the employees will be actually. And this is a very big important thing. Now let's try to quantify it. Normally, employees have 250 working days per year. Should an employee be taking 5 days sick leave? You evaluate what is the percentage of those sick leave as opposed. It's more or less actually 2% of your working environment, 2% of your work. Many companies don't make 2% of net profit. Many companies make less than 2% of net profit. Some companies make losses. Now, the less profit you make, the more stress you have, the more health issues you have, the more you'll pay. You see that it's a vicious circle. It never stops. And companies should be very careful with this. That's one measure. It's not the only measure, but it's one measure that is extremely important to be taken into account. And my advice is that companies should be taking those indicators seriously. The next indicator is extremely important as well. The next indicator is this idea of the cost of warranties. We build warranties, provisions for things to break, for quality defects. We build warranties because there is a risk. The biggest example is the airline industry that had actually their insurances more than quadrupled after the second Gulf War, after the 9/11. Now, that's, you would say, actually, I would insure any plane that is flying that potentially might be hitting a building. That's normal, you would say. So the insurance is actually much higher than 4 times or 5 times. But again, the second Gulf War, when infrastructure were was broken. We're talking here of roads in Iraq. We're talking of telecom infrastructure. We're talking of potentially as well bridges, etc. Those could not be insured, or so their insurances doubled. Now, this money we pay it in our lives when we insure our cars. The insurance is a warranty actually for not making an accident or for being refunded for an accident. Should we be a very good driver, then most probably that insurance cost could be avoided. Again, quality is the same thing, and quality could help us reduce those costs. This is interesting because those seven deadly diseases are still very relevant in our times, in our companies, especially in our context. Now, let's look at actually beyond those 7 deadly diseases. Dr. Deming developed actually 14 points. If you remember, some of you have worked on this subject in TBS 950 or actually in TBS 952. The 14 points of Deming are coming directly from those 7 deadly diseases or 5 deadly diseases. And those are prescriptive ways where Dr. Deming is recommending to the company, that Dr. Deming is recommending that companies would adopt to have a better performance. The first one, of course, is create constancy of purpose towards improvement, ensuring that improvement is part of your culture, ensuring that you replace your short-term reaction by long-term planning. This being said, let me emphasize, because some of you are in situations where we are saying, no, this is theoretical. How could I be long-term planning when I always have short-term emergencies? Well, short-term emergencies should be handled on the side of your long-term vision. And should you be stopping your long-term execution or the execution of your long-term plan, you should be still keeping it in mind. And that's the idea. You act maybe short-term, but at the same time you're keeping your long-term focus. That's more or less your lighthouse. So the lighthouse is where you're going long-term. The lighthouse, the boat will never forget that they are going towards the lighthouse. But as a wave will come, they might be going left and right to be able to avoid those waves and to be able to avoid sinking. Short term is part of life again, but long term should be our final focus. That's the first one. Second thing, Dr. Deming said that we need to adopt as a company a new philosophy. And I think I wouldn't convince or wouldn't try to convince any of you, because I'm sure you're convinced already that by now that quality is about culture. Quality is about thinking. It's not about a system. It's about a characteristic. It's not even about a process. Quality is about thinking. And therefore, if we were to adopt a quality management system, we need to work on the culture, on the philosophy. And this is extremely important, because as much as technology is easily or as difficult as to adopt, philosophy is more difficult. As much as you can adopt a process, write a procedure, make sure that you're applying the right processes, changing the minds is more difficult. This is a very important thing, and thinking about that in the 80s and 70s was actually avant-garde, very, very progressive. And this is actually, if we are to analyze the Japanese quality made in Japan, you'll see that actually this is what makes Japanese products much better, Japanese companies much more competitive. Third one, be careful of the idea of inspection and be careful of dependence on inspection. Now, this being said, you need to be looking at your processes and trying to put them in control. However, over-dependence on inspection will actually limit our scope, because inspection itself, the fact of the inspection, the process of inspection includes variation, and therefore can add to the variation and wouldn't add the person perspective or the people perspective into that. The fourth one, Dr. Deming prescribes actually the move towards a single supplier for any one item. Now, let me make a small comment on this prescription of Dr. Deming. As much as we respect this position, and actually theoretically that's true, if you get one supplier and you're able to control the variability of that supplier, then most probably your product will be less, will have less defects or less types of defect. However, the best practices in supplier selection is not to have one supplier, because you're taking big risks here. Being dependent on one particular supplier is too risky for the organization, and therefore you need to have the few suppliers. Now, how do I determine the few suppliers? Now, I'll give you practical use, and this is actually a very good exercise to do in your company if you've never done it. Should you have what you call key suppliers? We call them typically tier 1 suppliers or top partners or top suppliers. For example, in computers, I have Dell, I have Toshiba, and I have HP, for example. Those are my 3 key suppliers. Remember Pareto? Remember the 80-20 rule? Normally, only those 3 suppliers should have at least 80% of the purchases that you make. So you go to your purchase book or the payment book. That's better. You go to finance, ask them for the payment book, and you see what did you pay to which supplier. Normally, the 80-20 rule would work. And you should have maximum 80% of the suppliers, 80% of the purchases within the 80% of the purchases within those suppliers are made from those suppliers. If you have more than 20% with the other suppliers, they might be numerous, they might be 10, 20, 30. If you have more than 20%, then you have a cost improvement opportunity to do. This reasoning, this thinking, when I applied it in the case of Bell Canada, which used to make a purchase of almost $4 billion of indirect purchases, helped us save $500 million in less than 6 months. On $28 billion, it would help us save something like $2 billion or $3 billion. And this is an extremely important exercise to do, very fruitful for any organization that never done it before. And by the way, many of our organizations have never done this exercise of cost optimization. Now, very easy to do, however, you need to be careful. And this is a word of caution I give you. Typically, don't try to attack the direct purchases first. For example, some of you are working in hospitals. Don't start by optimizing the cost on the mission critical activities. For example, the medical equipment that is used for life-sustaining equipment, because you'll have a lot of resistance. Not necessarily that it wouldn't yield the advantage, because there could be a lot of resistance to change, and the biggest resistance will come actually, for example, in the hospital, from the doctors, from the hospital staff, the medical staff, etc. What I'll do, I'm noticing that there is a technical problem in terms of streaming. Let's take a small break, 5-minute break, 10-minute break, let's say, and then we'll be back in 10 minutes. Assalamu alaikum, marhab. Welcome back. So we'll continue with our course, inshallah. I'll try to stick to the slides, but Yusuf, I'm not able necessarily to always stick to the slides all the time. So allow me, because this is some of the content that is extremely useful, I think, for your career and for your life. Actually, should you be able to work out some of those tricks. I wouldn't call them tricks. I would call them actually practices in your business. So let's continue with the 14 points of Deming, and we'll after that move to the next leader. So the other thing, Dr. Deming always says, improve constantly and forever. This is the concept of continuous improvement. Sorry, let me send a message here, because somebody asked that I say broadcast started. So I hope you're online now. The improve constantly and forever. The day companies will stop looking at variation, the day companies will think that they have achieved the relevant quality and they wouldn't think about continuously improving quality, is the day those companies will start actually going downhill. And companies should never be complacent about the level they should pursue. Another thing, institute training on the job. There is not such thing, or there is not such recipe as professional or vocational training is enough. Training on the job is typically a very good source of training and knowledge, and we should actually make the best use of the time we spend at work and the team dynamics that would allow somebody to work and learn on their job. Leadership is extremely important thing, and leadership, as much as it was very progressive from Dr. Deming to start talking about leadership in a structured way in the 70s or 80s, while at that time we used to think that leadership is a talent that is we're born with. Leadership is a science and could be acquired, and we should be pursuing it in our companies actually as a way of developing our people. 8, drive out fear. Companies, employees should never fear retaliation in their company. Employees, for them to strive, they should be able to trust their management, trust the processes, and trust the direction of the company. And therefore, employees should not be fearful of anything in a company. They should trust that the company is working in the best interest of the employees, of the customers, of the shareholders, and the partners again. Break down the barriers between departments, ensuring that those departments work in the same direction of the company, and that's the 9th prescription of Dr. Deming. Eliminate slogans, and this is an important thing. Management by slogans, the big words, الكلام الفضفاض اللي ما يعني شيء, the words that don't mean anything. The slogans that are not followed by action are just pure waste of time in companies. They tend actually to dilute the real objective of, for example, an activity, of a process. Unfortunately, we quality people, we tend actually to always have those slogans in our thinking, in our discussion, and that actually dilutes the value that we are providing to companies. And this should be avoided as much as possible in companies. Eliminate slogans. Again, I wouldn't go back to discussing the elimination of management by objective. This is what Dr. Deming is prescribing. I will change it to implement properly management by objective. Therefore, implement the balanced view of objectives, a balanced view of performance measurement, a balanced view of the company that shouldn't favor one stakeholder on the expense of the others. 12th point of Dr. Deming is this: removing the barrier to pride of more workmanship. No employee would want to work if they feel diminished. No employee would want to work if they feel they are not proud of the work they are doing. And therefore, if you are putting control that would actually make the employee feel less proud, then you should remove them. Education and self-learning, we know now that actually a learning organization is an organization that is innovating, that's able to adapt to their environment. And finally, the 14th point is this idea that I've been pushing ever since we started this course, is the idea of transformation. Transformation is the job of everybody. Transformation is not the job of the leader. Transformation is not the job of the quality manager. Transformation is the everyday job of all the employees in a company. Transformation is something that should be built in the culture of the company, because if you remember, if we don't change, we become extinct. And therefore, the company should all the time, continuously thinking about what changes happen in the environment and how am I able to change those, to adapt to my environment. Now, if we are to summarize more or less the idea, and by the way, many authors as well followed Dr. Deming by developing some concepts and some models that use actually the 14 points into something that is more practical. This is one view that I'm presenting you here. The idea is leadership starts all, and the leadership, in addition to organizational learning coming from, so here you have leadership, visionary leadership, in addition to organizational learning coming from the experience of employees and customers, will help us manage the processes that would help us manage the outcomes or work on the outcomes, which will trigger quality. Quality would then trigger the employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction that are retrofit into the organizational learning. This is more or less, if you look at the FQM, for example, it's more or less, the FQM talks about leadership, talks about strategy, so the vision and leadership that would drive organization and processes towards objectives and results. So we will talk about the FQM more in detail in the next year and in the next course, which is TBS 955, inshallah. Now, the second author of quality, that is one of the top authors of quality, is Dr. Juran, actually. And Juran thinking could be summarized in a trilogy that has three basic processes that are essential for managing and improving quality. Planning. We need to be able to plan for quality. We need to be able to control quality. And we need to be continuously able to improve quality. Now, Dr. Juran prescribes two ways of improving quality. Dr. Juran talks about continuous improvement, basically incremental process improvement, and at the same time, and should it be required, what he calls actually breakthrough improvements. This improvement process should be applied on a project-by-project basis, and we should have a prioritization process of the projects, and that should be the only measure should be some kind of financial outcome or financial output. Now, Juran would tell you as well to apply the other tool that we talked about, which is the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule, by focusing on the very few vital items that would provide you the many issues, as opposed to focusing on the trivial many that take our attention without providing us with the right outcome. Dr. Juran was actually more pushing the idea and the concept of fitness to use as well. Now, the third theory that I wanted to present to you and that you are familiar probably with is the concept of quality coming by Philip Crosby, who wrote the document "Quality is Free." Now, what Phil Crosby used to push actually as a theory is that quality is free. It's non-quality that costs money. And should we be managing quality properly on the processes, we might be able to generate profit. Now, let me put actually some comment on this. Quality is not free. Should we think that quality is free, we are banalizing actually the activity around quality. Quality is a conscious pursuit that requires a change of culture, a change of behavior, and a change of processes or activities. So quality should be considered as worth the investment. Crosby specified as well a 14-step quality improvement product that will push towards zero defect. This here again, we understand as well that nothing can be defect free. Zero defect is probably a journey that we want to do, but we will never achieve. The idea is that we control the defects so that they are in an acceptable level. Now, Crosby as well has another thing. So sorry, I'm seeing here a question. Will I be able to revisit the lecture? Yes, all the lecture will be available online here and as well on YouTube. Let me go back to Crosby. Crosby uses a theory, behavioral and motivational theory, and we know that this is a limitation. We might be the most motivated possible, however, sometimes we're not able to pursue or achieve the right quality level. And this is actually what people would reproach that people would make to Phil Crosby concepts and approach. Well, the next one is an interesting one, which is actually what was prevailing in the 20th century, and that's the concept of scientific management. Frederick Tyler wrote actually the first book or the main book in terms of scientific management. And the concept of scientific management says that if we are able to split the process in unit sub-processes, and we're able to perfect the application of those sub-processes by having everybody focus on a perspective, on an activity, on a sub-process, without focusing on the big picture, then we might be actually doing much better. Now, you would understand that the sum of suboptimal processes is not necessarily an optimal process. So this was the limitation of the scientific process. However, this perspective is more or less acceptable should we be looking at the other extreme, which says everybody should be involved in planning. So not everybody should be involved in planning, but not everybody as well should be only focusing on execution. Now, let's look at, we saw those four theories or those four philosophers. We could have talked about Taguchi, we could have talked about as well about Ishikawa, we could have talked about Feigenbaum, Stewart, etc., etc., etc. But those actually summarize the extremes in terms of the quality thinking. And actually, the first approach and the first answer to having actually a common view on quality is to take this idea that we should not necessarily be stuck with one philosophy as opposed or as contradicting with the other philosophies. The best way to look in our context, in our company, is to focus on the fundamental questions during the self-assessment phase. The best way is to ask ourselves in our company, what are our strengths? What are our competencies? What do we need to improve? What are our competitors doing? What is the organizational structure? How do we achieve actually the customer wants? And before that, what do our customers want? What are their unmet needs? What are the customers? Where are they going? Where are they positioned? Meaning that when you are doing a self-assessment, you're looking at the company, you are understanding the company. Once you know that, you're able after that to have a deep understanding of your business. And when you have that deep understanding of the business, as well as a good understanding of the underlying approaches to quality improvement, then you should be picking from each theory to make actually your own quality approach. The idea here is to be creative in terms of selecting and then applying the selected quality approach. In this perspective, we shouldn't be positioning all those thinking, all those philosophies of quality as opposing, but rather as a toolbox that we'll be picking from to build what we call a contingency process. For each situation, for each company, we'll have a different perspective. For each company, for each environment, for each customer, for each set of customers, we'll have a different approach actually to quality. And that's actually a fairer approach. And by the way, I assume that this is the kind of conclusions you'll be having in your projects as well, because this is an interesting approach, and this is actually an approach that would allow you to adopt the change or to adopt the quality system to your companies. You'll notice that if you don't take this kind of approach, then your approach will be difficultly implementable and even more difficultly sustainable. Now, that's one side. The other perspective of quality is actually, instead of saying that I will be picking from each component, let's see what's common between all the theories, all the quality theories. And if you look at all the different quality theories, you'll see that actually, if we look at Deming, Juran, Crosby, Taguchi, Ishikawa, Fingenbaum, and all the other authors of quality, you'll see actually three main components of quality. You'll see the red ones that we will call the core variables. The second layer will be the blue ones, and the third layer will be the black one. The primary driver being customer focus. Now, in doing so, what are we saying? We're saying that for us to develop a quality theory, a quality system that fits our own environment, there are 5 key variables that need to be taken into account. The first one is the idea of leadership. The role of leaders is critical. You cannot develop the right vision should the leader not be able to do so. You cannot implement it should the leader not be able to get it implemented. You cannot adjust it should the leader not be able to adjust the plan, the original plan. You cannot measure it if the leader is not able to measure the plan as well, measure the performance. So the leaders should not only develop the plan, but they should be leading by example. And this is an important thing. It's not only talking the talk, but as well walking the talk as well. Leaders have a critical point in terms of developing and implementing and succeeding in terms of implementing the quality management system. The second thing, you cannot develop a quality management system or quality without thinking about the employees. And unfortunately, some companies think that quality is about the quality of the product. Quality is not about the quality of the product. Should your employees refuse to be producing quality products, then you won't have a quality product. And therefore, the employee improvement, the training for your employees, the investment in your employees has a direct impact on quality and quality improvement. The third perspective is the idea of standards. You cannot just design your products without any reference. You cannot just design your processes without reference. And the reference leads us to the idea of quality assurance. So you would have a reference and you will have to comply with the reference. It doesn't matter what system we're taking. It doesn't matter what standard we're taking. Ultimately, you need to be complying with some kind of expectations that you set to yourselves and that you have imagined against some benchmark as well for yourself. The other components, let me go back to the other ones. I think they are here. The other ones are the concept of customer focus, which means, now remember when we were talking about customer, and by the way, in the next chapter is about customer intimacy and customer knowledge and customer focus, and you'll see that knowing the customer is not enough. You need to be intimate with your customer. You will never go wrong if you continuously focus your efforts, your thinking, your processes towards customer satisfaction, towards satisfying their needs, towards understanding their wants, towards knowing them more and more and more. And this is an important thing. And all the theories will apply to this. And finally, quality is about culture. And all the theories agree that for you to pursue quality, and what made Japanese companies more performant than any other in the world, that made them the synonym of quality, is the idea of culture. Philosophy needs to be clear, simple, and focused. Should it be clear, simple, and focused, you'll then have the idea of constancy of purpose. You'll be able to adopt a culture that would help you, if you remember, gel the organization together and drive it towards quality, towards the pursuit of quality. And this is important. Now, if we look at those 5 components, we would compare them to, for example, ISO standard as a standard. And the management principles of ISO actually are very compliant with this. They would correspond to this. Customer is there, resources are there, people are there, the management responsibility is there, and ensuring that you're pursuing continuously improving quality is there. If you look at the FQM, the 5 enablers are leadership, strategy, so long-term focus, customer, knowing the customer, the processes, the resources, etc., 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 the organization. So you see that actually this will help us actually read into them. So that's the first layer. The first layer is what we have in red. The second layer is actually the enablers, which are the information analysis. What do we do, or what use do we make out of the data that is available? You'll never again go wrong by gathering and then using properly the tools, as we see in TBS 951 statistics, for example, to try to analyze, get information on the performance and trying to put it under control. That's first one, and it's extremely important. The more we know about the customer, the better we are able to serve it. The more we know about the process, the better we are able to have the process. The more we know about the shareholder, the better we know how to satisfy it. The more we know about our employees, the better we put them in their environment. The next thing, idea of strategic planning. Strategic planning helps you think in a strategic way. Quality is a strategic activity that needs to align with the key business factors, the key business direction, with the whole management philosophy of thinking. Third thing is the idea of environment and infrastructure. Now, the environment that you provide to your customer, the environment in which the company operates, and the environment in which your employees evaluate. And for this, infrastructure would actually be used to better serve the customers, to better serve the 4 stakeholders. Again, I wouldn't repeat it. The fourth tool that needs to be put at service in quality, and again, the first layer is the core concept, the second layer is more the enablers, the third layer, as we'll see, will be different. But the second layer, the last thing, You cannot serve a customer by not working as a team. Teams need to be cross-functional. They need to have the customer in heart. They need to have the shareholder in heart. They need to have the employee in heart. They need to have the partner in heart. And therefore, only teamwork would allow you to better serve the customers and better serve the 4 other stakeholders. And this is extremely important. Finally, to look at the perspectives, at the quality perspectives that you will be pursuing. It's very important that your quality department is not an inquisitive department as much as it is a coaching department, a department that is there to help and to train and to consult for the other departments in the company. Hello everybody, I apologize, there was a technical problem, so I had to redo the streaming. Now this is the last slide, so it's very important that we focus together, and after that so another 5 minutes and then we'll move to questions if you have questions, or we'll conclude actually in the coming 10 minutes, so we'll focus with me on those ones. This is very important, and I'll repeat the last message that I was saying at the end of the other. A message for you quality professionals. You're not in a company to actually find issues. You are in a company to solve issues, to help colleagues, to help other departments, to help the customer pursue properly the interests of the 4 stakeholders. You're there to help, to coach, to train, to consult. Many of us are too proud of the inspection results that we will go and use them as a way of exchanging favors, for example, with departments, as a way of threatening other departments, or are perceived as threat by other departments, and therefore our actually cause will be tarnished. Again, focus of the quality department, rather than performing a policing function, this department should have a coaching role, should have a knowledge transfer role, should have a training and consulting role. And this is extremely important in companies. The next thing, the need for large improvements is not necessarily opposing the concept of continuous improvements. Now, companies, to make competition irrelevant as prescribed in the blue ocean, needs to make competition completely irrelevant by changing the rules of the game. For you to change the rules of the game, continuous improvement is not enough. Continuous improvement doesn't go against the radical improvement. They must run in parallel, actually. We should be continuously seeking improvement, yet should we need a breakthrough improvement, we shouldn't actually take it. Now, this idea of integrative view, where we have actually the 3 components of quality, the 3 components of the quality theory, one of them being again the core of all the management systems, the second one being the enablers, the third one being I would say the philosophies or the approach to quality, etc. This would help you make your own perspective on quality. This will help you actually develop your own quality management system. So for you to develop your own quality management system, again, I'll go back to the concepts that we saw here. You need to be familiar with the quality concepts. You need to be familiar with the thinking of somebody like Dr. Deming. You need to be thinking of all the tools thinking of quality, Dr. Ishikawa, Juran, etc. The statistical approach, using Feigenbaum thinking, TBS 951. Those tools are actually your tools to pursue quality. Ultimately, quality is the matter of every company. every company should pursue their own quality management system, and that's the only guarantee for success. Why? Because ultimately it's about culture and it's about people. So with this, I have concluded what I had to do, since I didn't have actually necessarily interactions with the class, etc. It went faster than what we were expecting. Now, I will take another 5 minutes of questions. If any of you has question, please type it in the chat place. If any comment, and then after that, I'll conclude the class, if you don't mind. For your information, the class will be available online, so I'll keep it online here at the same place at live stream, but as well I'll upload the copy on YouTube, so you'll be able to consult it, and probably on Moodle as well. So you'll have a copy on Moodle or a link to the repository on Moodle, and hopefully it is helpful. So, before I conclude, I wanted to thank you for the time you spent with me this afternoon. I wanted as well to make sure that you are aware of who helped me, and I want to thank actually Faris, that you might be seeing. This is my son. Say hello, Faris, to everybody. That supported me in this course, and I hope you enjoyed it. And now I have here a question from Amr Dawood. Can you clarify the idea that quality is not about improving the quality of a product? So let me tell you the concept here. The point is that it's not only about improving the quality of a product. Quality is about ensuring that we do everything right in the interest of all the stakeholders. So the product might be actually the requirement of the customer. So for example, I wouldn't improve the quality of a product on the expense of my employees. I wouldn't be improving the quality of a product on the expense of the shareholder at any cost, for example. I wouldn't improve the quality of the product on the expense of my shareholders, my partners. So that's the idea. It's not necessarily that I'm saying it's not about the quality of the product only, but it's not only about the quality of the product. It's about the entire stakeholder satisfaction. So I hope I answered your question, Amr. So if there is no other question, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope this first experience was not that painful, and that we enjoyed collectively actually the experience, and hopefully we'll have many others in the future. Have a good weekend, and see you next week in class, inshallah.